Hey, welcome back to my channel Endless Pages. I'm Liv. Welcome to today's video, which is a really exciting one. It is my favorite reads of 2022. This is my first time filming one of these. I didn't film one last year for a reason I cannot give you. I don't know why I didn't do it. So I'm excited, my first time filming, and I'm excited because, yeah, I'm going to talk about all of the books that I absolutely loved in 2022. 2022 was just an incredible reading year for me. I think one of the best reading years I've ever had. I've read 65 books. I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of everything that I've read this year, and I've read some new and interesting formats, some new manga, some graphic novels. I've tried out some new authors that I never have before. I've pushed my comfort zone with reading, and it's really paid off. An amazing, amazing reading year. So I'm going to tell you my top 10 favorite books of the year. But before I get into that, I just want to do a few honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is two books. So The Poppy War and The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. I gave both of these books 5 stars. The first two books in the Poppy War trilogy, the third being The Burning God, which I will read in 2023. I'm scared to read it, so I'm putting it off. These two books are books that really were out of my comfort zone for me because of the writing style. I feel like I would really struggle to appreciate this kind of writing. My brain just wouldn't be able to keep up, but it did just keep up. These are by R.F. Kuang, if I didn't say that already. These books are absolutely beautiful. The world building is stunning. The characters are so well written. Like, there's not one character that you can root for. Like, well, I mean, you root for them, but they're all morally grey and they've all committed their own kind of crimes in their own way. And the main character, Rin, is such an incredibly written female character. She's like the definition of we support women's wrongs. This book is incredible. The magic system is absolutely fascinating. And I'm not someone that usually loves these long kind of war setting books in this kind of high fantasy setting, and like quite slow pace in the first one. But it's incredible. Like, I cannot put my finger on why I love these books so much. I think it's just a combination of everything. The plot, the writing, the magic system, the characters. It's incredible. I would highly recommend you check the trigger warnings before reading these books. There is an incredible long list of trigger warnings for this series. It's very confronting. There's some really, really hard to read scenes, but so incredibly well done. Yeah, I'm really scared to finish this series because it's going to break me, I know it is, but first honourable mention. Quickly, my second honourable mention is The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzie Lee, the third and final book in the Montagu Siblings trilogy. This is, I don't want to tell you the plot because I don't want to take up too much time, but this is the third and final book in this historical fiction trilogy. Each book follows a different Montagu sibling in the family, if you didn't figure that out. I had such a conflicted view about this book whilst reading it and a little bit after reading it, but the more that I reflect back on it, the more I realise how much I enjoyed this book. I think I had mixed feelings at first because the first book in the series is this fun kind of like young man's trip around the world gone horribly awry because he's such a troublemaker and always getting into trouble, and there's pirates involved and it all goes down to hell. So it's really fun and fast paced and laugh out loud funny, but at the same time it talks about serious mental health issues, and this book has also discussions of mental health issues, but it doesn't have that comedy to kind of balance it out. So maybe that's why at first I found this book a little bit more difficult, and I was so conflicted about it at first because it didn't have as much as that comedic balance. So I felt that it was harder to read, but it's a good thing. The main character has some OCD tendencies and some anxiety, and without spoiling it, you read from his perspective and his in a monologue. So it's really, really confronting because you're reading this guy's anxieties about himself, about how he's perceived, and it's constant. It's constant throughout this whole book, and every time he gets pulled on this crazy adventure, he's quite introverted, like homebody, scared of people, scared of speaking out against anything, and every time like this decision has to be made about what to do, you hear his thoughts about his catastrophization of all of these events. So if I do this action, this and this bad thing can happen to me, and will happen to me, and probably will, and actually will happen to me. This is the worst thing that'll happen to me because if I do this crazy action. So it's quite confronting because it's a thick book and it's, you know, you've constantly got his thoughts. But I think it did a really good job of dealing with mental health, and I just loved the main character, Adrian, and I loved his growth, and I loved how the people around him helped him become a stronger person, how he and himself didn't want to be reliant on other people anymore. He wanted to make his own way in the world. Despite mental health not being a topic that's talked about in the time period in like the 1800s, he still dealt with it so well, and he learned not to get rid of it, because that's not how mental health and stuff like that works. For a lot of people, it's something they live with their whole life. So learning to be able to live his life and manage it. I just thought this book was really good. It was conflicted at first because I wanted it to be a fun, fast-paced, final crazy adventure for the crew and the characters that you've met across all 3 books. It wasn't that, but I actually don't care now because this book was really well written. So I would recommend the trilogy. First book, fantastic. Second book, personally didn't like it, but I could see other people liking it. Third book, great. So yeah. My third honourable mention is The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska, and look at this copy. It is hand-signed and personalised. Ah, so cool. This is basically about 2 monstrous girls. There goes my phone. And they are both competing to literally rip the heart out of the prince. He has like this pure heart, so it's quite magical. And yeah, it's kind of enemies to lovers. It is really fun and fast-paced, and I just thought the romance was absolutely adorable. I loved the 2 female kind of monstrous characters and their completely different storylines and ambitions and how they perceived each other, and this slow realization that they are still competing yet they're slowly falling in love. Like, oh my god, it's absolutely so fun, such a good fantasy, such a good romance. Really fast-paced, and I absolutely adored this book and gave it 4 stars. Last honourable mention, I promise, is The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This is the first book in the Prison Healer trilogy. I haven't read the other 2 yet, but I loved this. This really surprised me. This is basically, I don't want to like go on and on about the honourable mentions, but it's about this girl. She's a healer of this like death prison, and I thought this was so fun, fast-paced. She competes in all like these little competitions to get out of the jail, and there's a big other plot going on, but I won't bore you with it. I loved the prison setting. It was really, really cool, and I found out it was inspired by an actual prison in Australia, which I thought was cool as well. And Lynette Noni is an Aussie author. Yeah, I loved the plot, super intriguing, loved the competition, loved the characters, loved the prison setting. That was sick, and I loved the ending. Like, I think it's either like the second last or it's literally yeah, the last couple of sentences in this book had me shook. Like, shock I did not see coming. Such a twist, and it's got me so excited to see what's coming in the other 2 books. It's a completed trilogy, so I can go and binge it all, but I just was really thoroughly surprised by this book. It's fun, fast-paced, cool setting, cool magic system. Yeah. Okay, that's enough time wasted on the honorable mentions. It's now on to the top 10 in no particular order. Again, in no particular order, the first book in my top 10 of 2022 is The Gracie by Kim Liggett. Oh my god, I adored this book. So The Gracie is set in this little village, and every year the girls aged 16 are sent into the wilderness to rid themselves of magic so that they can come back purified for marriage. No one really talks about what happens in the Gracia. It's like a taboo topic, and the girls are expected to go out and survive by themselves for a year in the wilderness and then return. This book to me is just really clever. The village they live in is very patriarchal, and the magic that the girls have is apparently just toxic and they need to get rid of it. And just the way that they send these girls into the wilderness to survive, and they're too busy kind of almost working against each other to use that strength and their smarts to question their way of living, question why they have no power in this village, question why if they want to work that they're going to set in these horrible conditions and kind of shunned from society. And if they, you know, waste all this time and break down their spirit during the grace year, then they have no fight left in them when they return. So I just thought that there's a really, really clever metaphor for the patriarchy and male control, and this book messed with me. So shit goes down during the grace year, and it starts to really, really mess with your head, because when you're reading this book, you're like, the magic is not magic, right? Like, it's just male lust that they can't, like, they think it's sinful that these women are coming into their own bodies and going through puberty, and it's just a disgusting, like, thing that men and lust, right? But then it starts to mess with your head, and while I was reading these Girls in the Wilderness, I felt like I was starting to go crazy as these girls were starting to go crazy. It made me question my opinion about the grace year, like, in terms of the magical side. Like, it really messed with my head, and I loved it because I felt like I was going just as crazy as the girls in the grace year were going. I thought it was really, really cleverly written. It really messed with my head for a lot of it, which I really, really loved. And it was a great story about women and women working together, their strength, the power and influence that they have. And yeah, it was really inspiring read, and one that really messed with me. So 5 stars, fantastic. Next up, again in no particular order, is This Is How You Lose a Time War by Amal El-Mahar and Max Gladstone. Wow, this book emotionally broke me. So this is about Red and Blue. They're on the opposite sides of this war, and one of them leaves like a taunt for the other one on the battlefield, and these taunts slowly start to turn into like something romantic. This book is so incredibly beautifully written. If you asked me to explain the plot, I could not. This book is not about the plot, it's about the romance. So ignore the plot, don't even worry about it, don't try and follow it, just let it happen and focus purely on the beautiful, beautiful letters that they leave for each other. Like, heartbreaking, stunning, oh my god. Erin from Shebas and Shelves, I was talking to her about it in a live reading sprint once, just after I read it actually, and she described it so well. She described the letters that they leave each other as like sensations. Like, you could, like, the way the descriptions were like sensations, like they were describing tastes and like all this beautiful, incredible writing style, if that makes sense. So yeah, this book was, it broke me. The romance between these two characters was unlike a romance I've ever read before. This was such a unique book. But yeah, go into this, do not care about the plot, do not try and understand the plot, just let the plot happen and focus purely on the love letters, and you'll have the most beautiful, heartbreaking, amazing time. Next up, we have a beautiful book by an Aussie author, Jacqueline Bublitz's Before You Knew My Name. Oh my god. Oh my god. I don't know if I could say that this is my favorite. Maybe it's my favorite, I don't know. Anyway, this is a kind of the story of two women. We have 18-year-old Alice, who kind of runs to New York with nothing but $600 cash and a stolen camera, and ends up being the city's latest Jane Doe. We then have a 30-something-year-old Ruby, and she has moved to New York from Australia, if I remember correctly. And she's running one day by the Hudson River, and yeah, the Hudson River, and she finds Alice's body. And when she finds Alice's body, she can't just seem to let this go. So this book is so moving and beautiful. So you know how when we listen to true crime podcasts, we watch true crime documentaries, we become obsessed and fascinated with the killer, we want to know how the killer did it, their motivation, how they get caught, and the victims kind of almost get forgotten. They become this faceless, kind of nameless entity that was just a victim. And yeah, it's kind of sad that we don't kind of talk about their stories, their lives, and this is what this book is kind of about. This book is about giving Alice a face, giving her name back. You learn about Alice's wants and her aspirations and her life and her dreams and her passions, and it was so devastating because you're not just following a murder story, you're getting to know this character as the book goes on. So you kind of read from her perspective after she dies, and you get to know this person even though you know right at the start of the book that she dies. And well, I mean, it kind of leads up to her death, but it's devastating because you're learning about her and you're growing so connected to her, knowing her fate. This book was so beautifully written, and I love that it was a book about giving a victim justice. There's also some dealings with Ruby's mental health as well, which is just so well done, and her desire and need to want to give Alice a face is just a face and a name, I should say, is just absolutely beautiful. And I love that there was barely any mention of the killer themselves. They focused on her and gave her an identity and gave her a last little bit of I guess dignity after her death. So this book was so incredibly written. I'm definitely want to do a reread this year because I'm filming this in 2023, and I want to take a highlighter and I just want to highlight all my favorite quotes because they were so moving. This book was like one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read. It's getting me all tongue-tied. Yeah. I would recommend this book to absolutely everyone. Next up is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, the third and final book in what is now probably one of my favorite trilogies, the Good Girls Guide to Murder trilogy. Oh my god. So quickly, the first book is about Pip, who is a high school student. She's doing a final project and she decides to do a investigation for her final project. 5 years ago in her town, a girl called Andy Bell was murdered by her boyfriend Sal, who then committed suicide. And Pip is not quite sure that Sal did it, so she decides to reinvestigate for her final year. The first book is kind of told in a podcasty form, like multimedia, which is just amazingly fun to read. This is the third and final book. So the first book and the second book are very similar in how they're set out. They're both kind of investigation, podcasty. The final book is quite different, and that is definitely a good thing. I was really worried that the third book would be a bit repetitive, but it really set itself out from the other two. It is a lot darker than the first two. What I really love about this book as well is that it's kind of full circle. If you know what I mean by full circle with the first book. You know what I mean. I can't say otherwise, it's a massive spoiler, but it comes full circle, which I love. It's just satisfying. And I love that there's consequences. Pip is dealing with dangerous people, investigating murders, and all of these horribly dangerous stuff. And she's a high school student. Like, this is dangerous. So as much as it's weird to say, but I like that there was consequences for this character. I like that she wasn't doing all of this crazy stuff and it was just like, okay, let's move on from that. You know, like, there's someone going around pushing buttons, asking questions that don't want to be asked. So to see that there was consequences was really, really good. I liked that. Really, really good. Well said, Olivia. Yeah, I love that the tone was a lot darker as well. A darker, more intense end to the series. Like, this was really nail-biting, intense, scary read. Like, the first two books are not as scary, but this one scared me. It's young adult, it scared me. And I like the dealing with Pip's mental health as well in this book. Again, the stuff that she's been looking into has been quite scary. A lot of scary things have happened to her, scary topics, so I like the way that they dealt with how she was dealing with that as well. The ending just put the biggest smile on my face. Again, if you know, you know. I love this series. It's so fantastic. All three books are so incredibly fast-paced, and I love that this one was so individual, such a banger of an end, and really stood out from the series. So 5 out of 5. So next up, I'm going to do two books together if I can, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I think I found a new favorite author. These are beautiful. These are kind of quite similar in vibe and message, so I'm just kind of going to try and do them together. This one is about a caseworker for the Department of Magical Youth. He's sent to an island to determine whether these 6 kids are too dangerous and might bring about the end of days. And Under the Whispering Door is about our main character whose name I can't remember. Wow, they really left an impact on me. Wallace, that's right. Wallace is approached by a Reaper who comes to collect him when he's dead, and he's kind of given 7 days, is it? Yeah, because Wallace is not ready for death, and he's given a week to live out his lifetime and deal with the fact that he's going to die before he crosses over. So that's these two books. They're both queer love stories. Oh my god, and they're both about kind of, in different ways, they're both about self-improvement. So House on the Cerulean Sea is about a character who's like really not happy in life. He's just stuck in this job and he's really kind of grouchy and grumpy. And this book is about him kind of getting to know these beautiful children. It's found family, getting to know these children and just really, really connecting with them and starting to question the organization he works for. And I think in the back of his head, he's always kind of had this like inkling of like, am I doing the right thing and stuff like that. So this is beautiful found family, absolutely adorable. And Under the Whispering Door is almost more heartbreaking, I think, than this one. Like, I think I cried more in Under the Whispering Door than I did in this one. I cried a lot in both, but this one I cried more in. Yeah, this is about him reflecting on his life, reflecting on the kind of person he was when he was alive, and he realizes that he wasn't happy with who he was as a person, and now that he's dead, he's like, I regret it. I regret all the things I didn't do. So it's him coming to terms with who he was. Again, it's a love story. It's absolutely heartbreaking and absolutely beautiful. And again, a little bit of found family as well. So I love these books. They were both so well written. I loved that they were both about self-improvement, but in such different ways. Both found family, both so creative, amazing different settings, but so emotionally moving. Next up, we have a classic. I am still so incredibly surprised that a classic is making it on my top 10 list. Like, can you believe it? But people were right about this book. This is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but this is about a young girl. She is a companion to this old lady. She hates her job, miserable. So then on a trip to the south of France, she meets this guy called Maxime de Winter. He is a recent widow, and just in this short couple of days, he's like, come move back to my little house with me and marry me. So they go to his little estate called Manderley. He's very, very wealthy, by the way. And she soon realizes that she doesn't really know her husband that well, and she is just living in the shadow of her husband's recently deceased wife, Rebecca. So the whole book is about this young girl who is living in the shadow and is haunted by Rebecca at every turn. The house is just filled with Rebecca's decorations. All the staff were just such big fans of Rebecca. The community loved her. So it's just her living in the shadow of this ex-wife, and you read the day-to-day of their marriage. And what I loved about this book, that it was almost kind of psychological, if that makes sense. Rebecca is not the main character's name, it's the ex-wife's name, and the author didn't give the main character a name. Like, how clever is that? So it even further diminishes her identity and makes her again so much like lesser than Rebecca. So yeah, you read about our nameless main character and her self-worth, and you just read this girl in this situation where she's now in this marriage. She has such a low self-esteem, and it's not being helped by, again, the constant comparisons to Rebecca. So this book is not at all what I thought it was going to be. Thought it was going to be a boring classic, but it was not. It was brilliant. The big twist in this as well, I did not see coming. It just turns into this like quick, fast-paced, like crazy storyline out of nowhere. So I really loved that. And it's also I would recommend it to people if you're like me and don't normally like the classic kind of writing style. If I can understand it, you can understand it. There was of course some lulls in the pace, but it's a classic and the writing was kind of beautiful and descriptive that I didn't really mind. So yeah, ending that came out of absolutely nowhere. Loved the twist, loved the techniques of the nameless main character, the comparisons to Rebecca, and that twist that just makes you go, oh my god. So yeah, this was brilliant. Again, I'm still in shock that a classic is in my top 5, but top 10 I should say, but it definitely belongs there. 5 stars. Next up is Fruits Basket Volume 1. I'm so happy I could put a manga in my top 10. This is brilliant. quickly, because I know I've been going on and this video is going to be so long. Main character moves in with this family, and when the family discovers when they are hugged by the opposite sex, they turn into the animals of the Chinese zodiac. So this book is absolutely beautiful. If you want something so adorably wholesome, filled with gorgeous messages and amazing characters, this is the manga for you. Our main character Toru is one of the most selfless characters I've ever read from. So beautifully optimistic, so hardworking, appreciates what she has in life, loves and just wants to take care of the people around her, is so loyal to everyone that she loves in her life, wants to see everyone grow, and just, I don't know, creates these beautiful connections with those around her. It's beautiful. Her relationship, her mother died. Her relationship she had with her mother, how she looks back on her mother, and all of the beautiful stories, and you could see why she turned out how she did. The messages and characteristics that her mother taught and made sure that she had before her death was just absolutely stunning. This book is beautiful. I am so excited to continue on with this. I love this book so much. It is my new comfort read, I think, and it's beautiful. That just sums it up. This manga is beautiful. 5 stars. Next up, we have The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine R. Dern, the first book in the, I always forget, what's this one called? The Winter Night Trilogy. Wow. This is a book inspired by like Slavic folklore set in Russia. It is so beautifully atmospheric, like set in this little tiny Russian village. It's like so atmospheric. I did a combination of like listening to the audiobook and reading along, which I think was a great job, just made me even more immersed in the atmosphere. This is about this little Russian family, and the kind of maid likes to tell the children stories of magic and folklore, which is kind of forbidden by the, well, not forbidden, but looked down upon by the church. But the youngest child, Vasya, who is this wonderful, wild younger sibling, she knows that these are more than just stories. She sees the little spirits that are guarding her home and senses the growing darkness in the woods. This is such an atmospheric fantasy. Oh my god, did I love it. The writing is just beautiful. You are so immersed and pulled into this tiny little village with all of this kind of snowy setting. I loved this because Vasya is not your typical, whatever that means, a feminine kind of girl. She's wild and she loves to run around and be in nature and, you know, be this wild and adventurous young girl. And she's just so curious and so protective and fierce natured, and I loved her. Really interesting sibling dynamics as well in this book. There was, I won't say to spoil, but there was one particular sibling relationship that I absolutely adored. And I loved the kind of father character in this book. He was really well written. I think he was so conflicted between doing the right thing as a father and, you know, wanting his child to be herself as well. So there was that really big conflict between that I really enjoyed throughout the book as well. Basically, this was beautiful and atmospheric and with a very well written female main character. I loved. 5 stars. Finally, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A big surprise that this one ended up on the list, but is it though? It's Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a wonderful book. It is a historical fiction, and the last one is a big surprise that it ended up on the list. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. But is it so surprising though? It's Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a historical fiction about a band in the 70s called Daisy Jones and the Six. It is a format that I love. It's in like interview format, which makes it so quick and easy to fly through. About, oh, my voice just cracked, about the band Daisy Jones and the Six from their early beginnings to their very end. So the story goes that they're a really famous band, but no one really knows why they broke up. So this is the first kind of interview where they tell the whole story about what happened, why they broke up, blah blah blah. So yeah, because it's interview format, it's super easy to fly through, super fast paced. I love it as well because you hear from like all the band members and some other people, and it's this conflicting kind of unreliable narrator because everyone's account of the events is like slightly different. Like some people think they came up with a certain lyric, some people thought it was their idea, so it's kind of like fun, conflicting storytelling. This book tackles really interesting and important topics as well because it's a historical fiction. It's kind of about Hollywood in the 70s, being in the music industry, being around topics of addiction and stuff like that. So that was quite a heavy, prominent theme of this book that I think was done really well. As well, my favourite character I want to say is Camilla. I know that's surprising. You think I'd say like Billy or like Daisy Jones, but no, Camilla. An incredibly written female character. I absolutely love her. So Camilla, if you don't know, is the main band singer is Billy, and it's Billy's wife, Camilla. I think she's a fantastic character in this book. Yeah, just so well written, and like her opinion on certain things happening in the book was just so like mind-blowing. Like I found myself agreeing with her, and she really made me question how I would look at different topics. I think she was incredibly well written. So I think this was such a fun, fast-paced book. The fact that it made me read about a topic that I would never normally read about, like music, is not really my thing, and I absolutely threw for it. And again, I sobbed at the ending. Absolutely sobbed. I'm now beyond excited for the TV show. I think it's going to be fantastic. I would highly recommend this to everyone. Again, it's another recommendation for everyone. Daisy Jones and the Six is fun, fast-paced, fun format, great human relationships, great discussions of addiction, and just so good. So many fun songs, and it really made me appreciate like how passionate people are about the writing process as well, like the writing of music. Like I don't care about that, but now I do. It's so good. So those are my top 10 reads of 2022 with some honorable mentions. I feel like I did not do a single one of those books justice, but oh my god, what a reading year, right? Like, oh my god, what a reading year. It makes me so optimistic and so excited for 2023's reading year to reflect back on the biggest and best of the year. I hope my 2023 is filled with even more 5-star reads. And thank you so much for watching this. I hope it didn't end up being too long, and I hope I did these books justice. If you like this video, maybe give it a like. That would be very much appreciated. Subscribe so you can see all of my content coming in 2023. As always, all my social media links are in the description below. Let me know in the comments, what was your #1 favourite read in December? I'm going to make you pick a #1, even though I didn't pick a #1. Anyway, thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in whatever the hell I post next. Bye!